The Alpha King disguised as a blind beggar to test his pack, but the poor Omega shared her last food. A full werewolf romance audiobook. My hands are bleeding again. I've been scrubbing clothes in this freezing stream since before dawn, and the skin across my knuckles has cracked open, leaving thin red lines that sting every time I plunge another nobleman's tunic into the water. I should stop. Wrap them, at least. But if I stop, I don't finish the laundry. If I don't finish the laundry, I don't get paid. And if I don't get paid, Lily doesn't eat. So I keep scrubbing. The smell of fresh bread drifts down from the castle kitchens, and my stomach clenches so hard I have to pause, breathe through it. I can't remember the last time I ate a full meal. Yesterday I had 3 turnips and a piece of cheese so moldy I had to cut away half of it. The day before, nothing at all. It wasn't always like this. 5 years ago, I had parents. I had a home that smelled like my mother's cooking, warm and safe. I had a father who brought home meat from his hunts and ruffled my hair when I made him laugh. I had a future. Then the rogues came, and everything turned to ash. Now I have Lily, 14 years old and unable to shift, the pack calls her broken. I have this freezing stream and these bleeding hands. I have a debt I can never repay to a beta counselor who smiles when he tells me I'll never be free. And I have one secret that keeps me going, hidden so deep I barely admit it to myself, the memory of the night I gave my last piece of bread to a blind beggar, and the way his hands trembled when he accepted it, as though kindness was something he'd forgotten existed. I didn't know then that the beggar was our Alpha King in disguise, testing us. Testing me. I didn't know that one moment of compassion would change everything, would expose the corruption rotting our pack from within, would topple the counselor who'd enslaved us, would lead me to a love I never believed someone like me deserved. All I knew was that he was hungry, and I had bread, and leaving him there in the cold felt like losing the last piece of my humanity. So I knelt down in the dirt, and I shared what I didn't have to give. And that's where this story really begins. The laundry mistress is in a mood today. I can tell by the way she snatches the basket from my hands without even looking at the clothes inside, her mouth already twisted in that expression that says she's found something to complain about. This work is barely acceptable, she snaps, holding up one of Lord Brennan's dress shirts. Look at this collar. Still stained. The stain has been set for weeks, it was there when she gave me the shirt. We both know this. But pointing it out would cost me the next batch of work, maybe get me banned from the castle laundry entirely. So I drop my eyes and let my shoulders hunch forward in the submissive posture Omegas are expected to maintain around higher-ranked wolves. I apologize, I whisper. I'll do better. She makes a dismissive sound and tosses a cloth bundle at my feet. It lands in the mud, and I have to kneel to retrieve it. Inside, 2 wrinkled turnips and a heel of bread so stale it could break teeth. Your payment, she says. Be grateful you got that much. I tuck the bundle into my apron and murmur my thanks. She's already walking away, the basket of clean laundry balanced on her hip like it weighs nothing. Like my work means nothing. Like I mean nothing. The walk back through the castle is familiar by now. Keep my head down, stay close to the walls, make myself invisible. Other wolves pass me in the corridors. Some don't even glance my way. A few curl their lips in disgust, like my presence offends them. One guard deliberately steps into my path, forcing me to stumble sideways to avoid collision. Watch where you're going, Omega, he growls, though we both know he's the one who moved into my way. Sorry, I mumble, not meeting his eyes. He laughs, a cruel, short sound, and continues down the hall. I press myself against the stone wall and wait for my heart to stop racing. 5 years of this, and it still makes my wolf want to snarl, want to fight back. But my wolf is small and came late, and she knows as well as I do that fighting would only make things worse. The kitchen work is waiting when I reach the lower levels. The head cook barely acknowledges me as I slip into the corner and begin scrubbing the massive iron pots stacked near the washing basin. The water is cold, the grease stubborn, and my hands, already raw from the morning's laundry, scream in protest with every movement. I think about Lily while I work. She'll be back at our cabin now, probably trying to mend her dress again. The fabric is so threadbare that patches don't hold anymore, but she keeps trying. She never complains, my sister. Never asks why this happened to us, why the pack treats her like she's defective just because her wolf never emerged. She just keeps her head down and stays quiet, trying not to draw attention. Sometimes I wonder if she remembers what it felt like to laugh. Hours blur together. Scrubbing, hauling, emptying chamber pots, sweeping floors. The nobles don't see me. The servants barely acknowledge me. I move through the castle like a ghost, present but not really there, doing the work no one else wants to do for payment that wouldn't feed a child. By the time evening arrives, my legs are shaking with exhaustion. But the stable work is still waiting, and the stable master doesn't accept excuses. The sun is setting when I reach the stables, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would be beautiful if I had the energy to appreciate them. Instead, I just feel the cold settling into my bones and know that the next 4 hours will be even harder than the last 12. The stable master is waiting, arms crossed, his expression impatient. About time, he grunts. The stalls won't clean themselves. I nod and grab the shovel from its hook. The familiar smell of horses and hay surrounds me, not entirely unpleasant, but mixed with the sharper scent of manure and soiled straw. This is my evening, every evening, mucking out 12 stalls, hauling the waste to the compost heap behind the building, spreading fresh straw, filling water troughs, checking each horse for signs of injury or illness. My shoulders ache within the first 20 minutes. The blisters on my hands, covered by thin strips of cloth I wrapped around them during my brief walk from castle to stable, break open and bleed through the fabric. The shovel handle grows slippery with blood, but I don't stop. Can't stop. I think about the debt while I work. 15 silver coins. That's what Vincent Thorne, our beta counselor, second only to the Alpha King himself, says my family owes the pack. He showed me the ledger 3 years ago, his finger tracing the neat rows of numbers that apparently justified enslaving me. Your parents' funeral, he'd said, his voice smooth and reasonable. The burial plots, the ceremony, the resources used to hunt the rogues who attacked your family. It all has a cost, Clara. Surely you understand. I'd been 21 then, still reeling from grief, my wolf barely emerged after years of being a late bloomer. Lily had been 11, still hoping her shift would come any day. We'd been alone, vulnerable, and Vincent had known it. 15 silver coins, he'd continued. Payable at 2 silver per month. Very reasonable terms, I think you'll agree. 2 silver per month. I'd stared at him, unable to process how I was supposed to earn that kind of money when the only jobs available to a late shifting Omega were the ones I was already doing, laundry, cleaning, stable work. Jobs that paid in food scraps and the occasional copper piece. And if I can't pay? I'd asked, my voice small. Vincent's smile had been cold. Then you and your sister will be expelled from pact territory. I'm sure the rogues beyond our borders would be happy to see you again. The threat had been clear. The same rogues who killed our parents would finish the job with Lily and me. We'd be dead within days, maybe hours. So I'd agreed. What choice did I have? 3 years later, I've paid exactly 0 silver coins. Every copper piece I manage to earn goes toward food for Lily, medicine when she gets sick, mending our clothes, keeping our cabin from falling apart entirely. And every month, Vincent adds interest and administrative fees to the debt, so instead of shrinking, it grows. 15 silver has become 18. 18 has become 22. I'm drowning in numbers that make no sense, trapped in a system designed to keep me trapped forever. A horse nickers softly, pulling me out of my spiraling thoughts. I'm in the 8th stall now, my arms burning, my back screaming. The pile of soiled straw is enormous. For more stalls to go. I keep working. Near midnight, the stable master returns. He looks me up and down with obvious disdain, his lip curling slightly, then drops a small loaf of bread on the ground near my feet. "Your payment," he says. "Try to show up on time tomorrow." I was on time today. I'm always on time. But I just nod and bend to pick up the bread, cradling it carefully. This is what Lily and I will live on for the next 3 days. Maybe 4 if I can find wild greens to stretch it. The stable master leaves without another word. I finish the last stall in the heavy silence, my movements mechanical, my mind numb. When everything is done, stalls clean, horses settled, tools put away, I finally allow myself to leave. The night air hits my face, cold and sharp. I stand there for a moment, just breathing, the bread tucked safely in my apron alongside the turnips from this morning. My whole body hurts. My hands won't stop bleeding. The exhaustion is so profound it feels like drowning. Tomorrow I'll do this all again. And the day after that. And the day after that, until either the debt is paid, which will never happen, or I collapse from the effort. I start the long walk back to our cabin, following the narrow path that winds through the forest at the edge of pack territory. Our home is isolated, far from the main settlement, in a location no one else wanted. But at least it's ours. At least Lily will be there, probably asleep by now, curled up under our one thin blanket. The path curves around the castle wall, and that's when I see him. A figure slumped against the stone, barely visible in the darkness. At first, I think he's drunk, some wolf who had too much ale and passed out on his way home. But as I get closer, I notice the tattered clothing, the dirt smeared across visible skin, the way his hands are outstretched as though reaching for something. And the bandages wrapped around his eyes. A blind beggar. I should keep walking. I have nothing to spare. Lily needs this bread more than a stranger does. Every logical part of my brain is screaming at me to keep moving, to not get involved, to protect what little I have. But I can't. Maybe it's because I know what it feels like to be invisible, to have hundreds of people walk past without seeing you. Maybe it's because my mother once told me that compassion is the only thing that separates us from the rogues, and I'm desperately clinging to that memory. Maybe I'm just too tired to be sensible anymore. Whatever the reason, I find myself kneeling beside him, my voice soft in the darkness. "Are you hurt?" He doesn't respond immediately. For a moment, I think he might actually be unconscious, and I'm trying to figure out what to do. I can't carry him, can't call for help without drawing the kind of attention that would get us both in trouble, when his head moves slightly. Tilts toward my voice. His voice is rough, like he hasn't spoken in days. Where? "You're by the castle wall," I tell him gently, studying what I can see of his face in the moonlight. He's younger than I initially thought, maybe early 30s, with dark stubble covering his jaw and dirt smeared across his cheeks. The bandages around his eyes are filthy, stained with age and wear. "Can you stand?" He tries. His hands push against the ground, his body trembling with the effort, but he only manages to get halfway up before his strength gives out and he slumps back against the wall with a soft grunt of pain. My heart clenches. I recognize that sound, the sound of someone who's pushed past exhaustion, past hunger, past the point where their body should cooperate. I make that sound every night. "It's okay," I say quickly. Just rest. "Have you eaten today?" The question is stupid. Of course he hasn't eaten. I can see his collarbones jutting out beneath the torn fabric of his shirt, can see the hollow spaces in his cheeks that speak of prolonged hunger. He shakes his head slowly. "No food," he whispers. No one stops. The words hit me harder than they should. No one stops. Of course they don't. I've watched my pack for 3 years now, watched how they treat anyone perceived as weak or useless. Beggars are beneath notice. Omegas like me barely rank higher. The strong prey on the weak here, and everyone else looks away. I should look away too. Should conserve my resources, think of Lily, be practical. Instead, I reach into my apron and pull out the bread. The loaf the stable master gave me. The food that's supposed to keep my sister and me alive for the next 3 days. My hands shake as I break it in half. Here, I say, pressing one piece into his outstretched palm. His fingers close around it immediately, clutching it like it's the most precious thing in the world. Maybe it is. Eat slowly. Your stomach won't handle it well if you eat too fast. For a long moment, he just holds the bread, his head bowed. I can't see his expression behind the bandages, but something about his stillness makes my chest tight. Why, he finally asks, his voice so quiet I almost miss it. You don't know me. I don't have a good answer for that. I should be asking myself the same question. Why am I giving half my food to a stranger when Lily's face is getting thinner every week? Why am I risking what little I have for someone I'll probably never see again? Because you're hungry, I say simply. It's the truth, even if it's not the whole truth. And because someone should stop. Someone should see you. He lifts his head at that, and even though I know he can't actually see me through those bandages, I feel the weight of his attention like a physical thing. Like he's looking straight into my soul. What's your name? He asks. I hesitate. Giving my name feels dangerous somehow, like I'm offering more than just bread. But there's something about this moment, kneeling in the dirt beside a blind beggar in the middle of the night, both of us at the mercy of a pack that doesn't care if we live or die, that makes pretense feel pointless. Clara, I tell him. Clara Gorge. Clara. He says it carefully, like he's tasting the syllables. Thank you, Clara. He pauses, and I wonder if he's deciding whether to give me a real name or a false one. Frederick. My name is Frederick. Eat, Frederick, I say, nodding toward the bread still clutched in his hand. Before it gets cold. Well, colder. He does, taking small bites like I suggested, chewing slowly. I watch him for a moment, then turn my attention to my own half of the bread. It's barely enough for one person, let alone two. Lily and I will be hungrier than usual this week. But somehow, watching Frederick eat, I can't bring myself to regret the decision. We sit in silence for a while, two people at the bottom of the pack hierarchy sharing a meal that shouldn't have to be shared, that should have been enough for both of us separately if the world were fair. But the world isn't fair. I learned that the night my parents died. Do you have somewhere to go? I ask eventually. When you're stronger. Family, friends? Frederick shakes his head. No family nearby. No friends. A bitter smile crosses his face. No one wants a blind beggar as a friend. The words echo my own experience so precisely that I have to look away, blinking against the sudden burn in my eyes. No one wants a defective Omega and her broken sister either. I understand, I whisper. And I do. Maybe that's why I stopped. Not just because he was hungry, but because I recognized something in him, that same isolation, that same invisibility I've been living with for years. Misery loves company, they say. Or maybe compassion recognizes compassion, even in the dark. I should go, I say reluctantly, aware that Lily will be worried if I'm much later. My sister will be waiting. But if you're still here tomorrow, I'll bring you something. If I can. I can't promise that. I shouldn't promise that. But the words come out anyway. Frederick tilts his head again, and that strange feeling of being truly seen washes over me once more. You have a sister? Lily. She's 14. I trail off, not sure how to explain. Not sure I want to explain Lily's inability to shift to a stranger, even one who seems kind. But Frederick just nods, like he understands the things I'm not saying. Take care of her, he says quietly. And take care of yourself, Clara Gorge. The pack needs more people like you. The compliment catches me off guard. I'm not used to compliments. I'm not used to anyone suggesting I have value beyond the work I can do. My throat tightens, and I have to swallow hard before I can speak. Thank you, I manage. Then, because I'm not sure what else to say, good night, Frederick. Good night, Clara. I stand, my knees protesting, and start down the path toward home. After a few steps, I glance back. Frederick is still sitting against the wall, the bread finished, his bandaged face turned in my direction. Watching me leave, even though he can't see. I turn away quickly and hurry into the forest. It's only later, when I'm almost home, that I realize something strange. For a blind man, Frederick seemed remarkably aware of his surroundings. The way he tilted his head to track sounds. The way he seemed to know exactly where I was even when I moved. I push the thought away. I'm overthinking, seeing patterns where there are none because I'm exhausted and half-starved and desperate for something, anything, to be different about my life. He's just a blind beggar. I shared my bread with him because I'm not completely dead inside yet. That's all. That has to be all. I didn't know it then, but Frederick wasn't just a blind beggar. He was Frederick Green, Alpha King of the Silverwood Pack, and he was testing us. Testing me. He'd spent the entire day before our meeting wandering through pack territory with those fake bandages covering his eyes, his alpha aura completely suppressed, a feat that required constant concentration and left him feeling hollow, disconnected from the power that usually hummed beneath his skin. He'd wanted to see how his pack treated their most vulnerable members. What he'd seen had made his wolf snarl with barely contained rage. Merchants had spat at him. Vendors had thrown rocks. Guards had kicked him when he sat too close to their posts. Noble wolves had stepped over him like he was garbage in the street, their fine clothes swishing past his face without pause. Children had laughed and called him names while their parents did nothing to stop them. Not one person had offered help. Not one person had stopped. Until me. Frederick told me this later, much later, after everything had changed. He described how he'd been sitting against that castle wall for hours, listening to footsteps approach and then continue past, each set of feet another confirmation that his pack had lost its soul. He'd been about to give up, to return to the castle and confront Vincent Thorne with incomplete evidence but a heart full of certainty that the corruption ran deeper than taxes and fabricated debts. Then he'd heard my footsteps. Different from the others, slower, heavier with exhaustion. He'd heard me stop, heard the sharp intake of breath when I saw him, and he'd waited for me to keep walking like everyone else. But I didn't. Instead, I knelt beside him. Asked if he was hurt. Offered him bread I clearly couldn't spare. He said later that when I pressed that piece of bread into his hand, when I told him someone should stop, someone should see you, something in his chest had cracked open. Because I wasn't just seeing a beggar. I was seeing him, the person underneath the disguise, the vulnerability he was performing but also genuinely feeling in that moment of powerlessness. And I'd given him exactly what he'd been searching for, proof that compassion still existed in his pack. Proof that not everyone had been infected by Vincent's corruption. Proof that the values he'd been trying to rebuild for 8 years, dignity, protection of the vulnerable, community over hierarchy, could take root if given the chance. I was that chance. He watched me walk away that night, tracking my footsteps through the darkness with senses far sharper than a blind beggar should have possessed. He memorized my scent, lavender soap and exhaustion, hard work and something sweeter underneath. He listened to the way I spoke to him, gentle and careful, like he mattered. And he made a decision. He would save me. Us. All of us trapped under Vincent's system. But first, he had to finish his test. I saw Frederick 3 more times over the next week. The first time was 2 days after our initial meeting. I'd managed to sneak an apple from the castle kitchens, not quite stealing, since it was bruised and would have been thrown out anyway, and I brought it to the place by the castle wall where I'd found him. He was there, sitting in almost the exact same position, and his face lit up when he heard my approach. "Clara," he said, before I'd even spoken. Just my name, like a greeting and a question all at once. How did you know it was me? I asked, kneeling beside him and pressing the apple into his hand. Your footsteps, he said simply. I've learned to recognize them. That should have seemed strange, we'd only met once, and briefly, but I was too tired to question it. Instead, I sat with him for a few minutes while he ate the apple slowly, savoring each bite. How is your sister? He asked between bites. Lily's fine, I lied. She wasn't fine. She'd been coughing for 3 days, and I didn't have money for medicine. But I didn't want to burden this blind beggar with my problems. He had enough of his own. Frederick tilted his head in that way he had, like he was studying me even though he couldn't see. You're a terrible liar, Clara. I laughed, a short, surprised sound. When was the last time someone had made me laugh? Maybe so. But we're managing. We always manage. You shouldn't have to just manage, he said quietly. You should be thriving. The words hung between us, beautiful and impossible. Omegas like me didn't thrive. We survived. That's all we could hope for. I changed the subject before the grief could choke me. What about you? Are you going to stay here? In the pack? For a little while longer, Frederick said. There's something I need to see through. I didn't know what that meant, so I just nodded. We sat together in comfortable silence until I had to leave for my evening shift at the stables. The second time I saw him was in the market square during the monthly tax collection. I was waiting in the Omega line, 12 of us, all thin, all exhausted, all clutching whatever coins we'd managed to scrape together. The guards were checking names against their ledger, and I was trying to make myself invisible while I waited my turn. That's when I noticed Frederick sitting near the well, his bandaged face turned toward the proceedings like he was watching even though he couldn't see. I watched him watch us, and something about his stillness made my skin prickle with awareness. He was listening. Listening to the guard tell Mira she was short 3 copper pieces. Listening to Mira beg, explaining that her son was sick, that she'd spent the money on medicine. Listening to the other guard grab Myra's arm hard enough to make her cry out. Frederick's hands clenched into fists at his sides. His jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he might stand, might intervene despite his blindness and obvious weakness. But he didn't. He just sat there, listening, while Myra's neighbor paid the extra copper to save her. While the pregnant Omega-3 people ahead of me was accused of lying about her payment and dragged away to the stocks. While I handed over the 2 silver coins I'd borrowed from the Pax lending house, which meant I'd owe 3 silver by next month because of interest, and the guard marked my name with a notation I couldn't read. When it was over and the line dispersed, I made my way toward Frederick. His face was still turned toward where the guards had been, and his expression was harder than I'd seen before. Almost dangerous. Frederick? I said softly. He turned to me immediately, and some of that hardness softened. Clara. You're all right? I paid, I said, though we both knew that didn't mean I was all right. Did you hear all of that? Every word. His voice was tight with controlled anger. This happens every month? Every month, I confirmed. Sometimes worse. The guards falsify the records, claim we didn't pay when we did, add fees that don't exist. We can't fight it. If we complain, we're expelled. And the pregnant Omega? She'll be in the stocks for a week. In her condition. I trailed off, not wanting to finish that sentence. We both knew what a week in the stocks could do to a pregnant woman. Frederick was silent for a long moment. Then, it won't always be this way. I wanted to ask what he meant, but something in his tone made me hesitate. He sounded less like a powerless beggar and more like someone making a promise. Someone with the authority to keep it. But that was impossible. So I just squeezed his shoulder gently and went back to work. The third time I saw him was the night everything changed. Vincent Thorne summoned me to his office on the 7th day. The message came through one of the castle guards while I was scrubbing floors in the main hall, and my stomach dropped the moment I heard the name. Vincent never summoned Omegas to his office unless something was wrong. I went anyway, because refusing would be worse. His office was on the second floor of the castle, in a section I rarely entered, all polished wood and expensive tapestries, so different from the servant areas I usually occupied. The door was open when I arrived, and Vincent sat behind an enormous desk covered in ledgers and documents. "Clara Gorge," he said, not looking up from his writing. "Come in." "Close the door." I obeyed, my heart hammering. The door clicked shut behind me, and suddenly the room felt very small. "Do you know why I called you here?" Vincent asked, finally meeting my eyes. His expression was pleasant, almost friendly, which somehow made everything worse. "No, sir. Your debt has grown considerably." He opened one of the ledgers and turned it to face me. I couldn't read most of the words, but I could see the numbers. 25 silver coins. It had been 15 3 years ago. Interest, late fees, administrative costs. It compounds, you understand. 25 silver coins. I would never earn that much in my lifetime. "I've been paying," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Every month, I pay what I can. What you can isn't sufficient." Vincent leaned back in his chair, studying me like I was an interesting problem to solve. "I'm a reasonable man, Clara. I understand that circumstances can be difficult. So I'm prepared to offer you an alternative arrangement." The way he said alternative arrangement made my skin crawl. "What kind of arrangement?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Part of me had known this was coming eventually. "You're a young woman. Presentable when you're cleaned up. There are certain services you could provide that would reduce your debt significantly." His smile widened. "Certain nobles in the castle are always looking for companionship. I could arrange introductions. Your debt would disappear quite quickly under such an arrangement." The room tilted. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the roaring in my ears. He was asking me to sell myself. To become a courtesan, a mistress, huh? "No," I said. The word came out stronger than I felt. "No, I won't do that." Vincent's pleasant expression didn't change. "Then you have 1 week to produce 10 silver coins. If you cannot, you and your sister will be expelled from Pact territory. I'll have the guards escort you to the border personally. I don't have 10 silver coins. You know I don't." 1 week, Clara." He opened his ledger again, dismissing me. "I suggest you consider your options carefully. For Lily's sake." I left his office in a daze. Made it all the way down the corridor, down the stairs, out the servants' entrance before the reality of what had just happened hit me fully. 1 week. 10 silver coins. It was impossible. I couldn't earn that in a year, let alone a week. And the alternative, the thing Vincent wanted me to do, I couldn't. I wouldn't. I'd rather die. But if I died, what happened to Lily? I found myself walking without conscious direction, my feet carrying me through the Pact territory as the sun set and the moon rose. I walked past the market square, past the residential areas where families were settling in for dinner, past the edge of the settled lands toward the forest. Toward the cabin I shared with Lily. But I couldn't go there yet. Couldn't face her with this news. Couldn't tell my 14-year-old sister that we had 1 week before being thrown to the rogues, and the only way to prevent it was for me to become Vincent Thorne's puppet. So I turned around. Headed back toward the castle. My legs were moving on instinct now, carrying me to the one place that had felt even remotely safe in the past week. The place by the castle wall where Frederick waited. He was there. Of course he was there. Sitting in the shadows, his bandaged face turned toward the sound of my approaching footsteps. But this time, I didn't greet him. Didn't kneel carefully beside him with food I'd managed to steal or save. This time I collapsed. My knees hit the ground hard enough to hurt, and suddenly I was sobbing, gasping sobs that shook my whole body. All the fear and desperation and rage I'd been holding back for 3 years came pouring out in broken sounds I couldn't control. I felt Frederick move beside me, felt his hand, warm and steadier than it should have been, rest gently on my shoulder. Clara. His voice was soft, concerned. Clara, what happened? I can't, I gasped between sobs. I can't do it anymore. I can't, he wants, 1 week, I don't have, Lily will. I wasn't making sense. The words tumbled out in fragments, my mind too chaotic to form complete thoughts. But Frederick didn't ask me to clarify. He just moved closer, and somehow I ended up with my face pressed against his shoulder, his arms around me in an embrace that felt impossibly safe for someone who was supposed to be helpless. Breathe, he murmured. Just breathe, Clara. I'm here. I'm listening. So I breathed. And slowly, piece by piece, I told him everything. About Vincent's office. About the debt growing to 25 silver. About the alternative arrangement and the 1-week deadline. About Lily and the rogues and the impossibility of my situation. Frederick listened to all of it, his arms steady around me, his presence solid in a way that made no sense for a blind beggar sitting in the dirt. When I finally ran out of words, when the sobs had quieted to hiccups and my voice was hoarse from crying, he spoke. Look at me, Clara. I lifted my head, confused. You can't see me. Look at me anyway. So I did. I looked at his face, at the dirty bandages covering his eyes, at the strong jaw and the stubble and the mouth that had accepted my bread with trembling hands a week ago. And then Frederick did something impossible. He reached up with both hands and unwrapped the bandages. They fell away in strips, revealing eyes that didn't look blind at all. Eyes that were clear and striking and the most intense blue I'd ever seen. Eyes that were looking directly at me with perfect, sharp focus. Eyes I recognized. Because I'd seen them before, in the portraits hanging in the castle's great hall. Portraits of the royal line. Portraits of... My name is Frederick Green, he said quietly, his voice no longer rough or weak but commanding. And I am the Alpha King of the Silverwood Pack. The world stopped. I stared at him, at the Alpha King, and my mind couldn't process it. Couldn't reconcile the powerful man before me with the helpless beggar I'd been feeding. Couldn't understand why the ruler of our entire pack had been sitting in the dirt pretending to be blind. I started, but my voice failed. I'm sorry, Frederick said, and he actually looked sorry. I'm sorry for the deception. I had to see the truth for myself. Had to witness what was being done in my name. You're the Alpha King. It came out flat, emotionless, because I was beyond feeling anything else. Yes. And you've been lying to me. Yes. He didn't try to justify it, didn't make excuses. I've been testing the pack. Testing whether anyone still had compassion. Whether the values I've been trying to rebuild actually took root. I stood up abruptly, taking several steps back. My hands were shaking. So I was, what? An experiment? You wanted to see if the pathetic Omega would share her bread? No. Frederick stood as well, and suddenly his full presence was visible. The alpha aura he'd been suppressing flooded outward, making my wolf want to submit even as my human side wanted to scream. You were never pathetic. You were the only person in this entire pack who saw someone suffering and chose to help. The only one who stopped. The only one who reminded me why I'm fighting to fix this place. Fix it? A hysterical laugh bubbled up. You're the Alpha King. You could have fixed it years ago. Instead, you let Vincent Thorne create debts and tax schemes and, my voice cracked. You let him destroy us. I know. Frederick's expression was anguished. I know, and I'm sorry. I trusted my counselors. I thought the laws I'd changed were enough. I was wrong. I was ruling from a distance, and I didn't see what was happening right under my own roof. Well, now you've seen it. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold. Congratulations. Your test is complete. I hope it was enlightening. Clara. Don't. I backed away another step. Don't use my name like we're friends. We're not friends. You're the Alpha King, and I'm the Omega you were studying. That's all this was. If you're enjoying this story and want to know what happens when Clara discovers the truth, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single chapter. This is just the beginning of their journey, and trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. New subscribers are joining our pack every day, and I'd love for you to be part of it. Hit that subscribe button now, and let's continue this story together. That's not all this was. Frederick took a step toward me, then stopped when I flinched. His voice gentled. Yes, I was testing the pack. But what you did, the kindness you showed me, that wasn't part of any test. That was real. You were real. And you reminded me what I'm supposed to be protecting. Great. I'm so glad I could help. The bitterness in my voice was thick enough to taste. Now if you'll excuse me, I have 6 days to earn 10 silver coins before your beta counselor throws my sister and me to the rogues. So unless you're planning to actually do something about Vincent Thorne instead of just observing him? I am. Frederick's voice turned hard. Sharp. I'm doing something right now. Vincent Thorne will answer for what he's done. So will every guard, every merchant, every noble who participated in or ignored this corruption. I promise you, Clara, things are going to change. I wanted to believe him. Goddess, I wanted to believe him so badly. But belief felt dangerous. Hope felt dangerous. I've heard promises before, I said quietly. They don't mean much when you're starving. Then I turned and walked away, leaving the Alpha King standing alone in the shadows. My hands were still shaking. My face was still wet with tears. And somewhere deep in my chest, something that might have been hope was trying to kindle. But I crushed it before it could catch fire. Hope was a luxury I couldn't afford. The summons came the next morning. Every wolf in the pack, every single one, from the highest-ranked noble to the lowest Omega, was commanded to attend an emergency assembly in the castle courtyard at midday. Failure to appear would be considered treason. I'd never heard of a pack-wide assembly before. The proclamation was read by guards going door to door, their expressions grim and formal. When they reached our cabin and delivered the message, Lily looked at me with wide, frightened eyes. What's happening? She whispered after the guards left. I don't know. It was the truth. I had suspicions. Frederick had promised things would change, but I didn't dare voice them. Didn't dare let Lily see the fragile hope I was trying so hard to smother. We dressed in our best clothes, which wasn't saying much. Lily's dress was patched and faded. Mine was clean but worn thin at the elbows. We looked exactly like what we were, poor Omegas at the bottom of the pack hierarchy. The walk to the castle took 40 minutes. By the time we arrived, the courtyard was already filling with wolves. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. I'd never seen so many pack members in one place before. Nobles stood in clusters, whispering to each other. Merchants looked nervous. Guards lined the perimeter, their hands on their weapons. And the Omegas, we gathered in the back, trying to be invisible, trying not to draw attention. I held Lily's hand tightly as we found a space near the courtyard wall. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Around us, speculation ran wild. Maybe the Alpha King is finally getting married, someone murmured. I heard there was a rogue attack in the Northern Territory. No, this is about taxes. They're raising them again. No one guessed the truth. At exactly midday, the castle doors opened. Frederick emerged, not dressed as a beggar this time but in full royal regalia, a deep blue cloak over black clothing, a silver circlet resting on his dark hair. His alpha aura rolled out like a wave, commanding instant silence and submission. Behind him walked his royal guards. And between them, looking considerably less confident than yesterday, was Vincent Thorne. The crowd's murmur rose and then fell silent again as Frederick reached the raised platform at the courtyard's center. He stood there for a moment, his blue eyes scanning the assembled pack, and when his gaze passed over the section where the Omegas stood, I could have sworn he looked directly at me. "My pack," Frederick began, his voice carrying across the courtyard with alpha command. "I have called you here today because I have witnessed something that cannot stand. Something that strikes at the very heart of what we are supposed to be." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Vincent stood rigid, his expression carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "For the past week," Frederick continued, "I have walked among you in disguise. I suppressed my aura, covered my eyes, and dressed as a blind beggar. I wanted to see how we could treat our most vulnerable members." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Nobles looked at each other in shock. Guards went pale. And in the Omega section, several wolves made small, distressed sounds as they realized the implications. "What I witnessed," Frederick said, his voice hardening, "was systematic corruption, cruelty, and exploitation. I watched as Omegas were extorted for silver they didn't have. I watched as falsified debts were used to trap families in servitude. I watched as a pregnant woman was dragged to the stocks for a crime she didn't commit. I watched as merchants threw stones at a beggar for the crime of existing. I watched as guards kicked and cursed and threatened." He paused, letting the words sink in. The courtyard was silent except for the wind. And in all that time, in all those days of testing, only one person stopped to help. Only one person saw someone suffering and chose compassion over convenience. Frederick's eyes found mine across the crowd. This time, there was no mistaking it. "Clara Gorge," he said, and suddenly every eye in the courtyard turned toward me. "Step forward, please." My blood turned to ice. Lily's hand tightened on mine, her fear palpable. Around us, wolves shifted away, creating a path I didn't want to walk. "Go," Lily whispered. "You have to go." My legs felt like water as I moved forward. The crowd parted before me, nobles and merchants and guards all staring as I made my way toward the platform where the Alpha King stood. I kept my eyes down, my shoulders hunched, every instinct screaming at me to be small, to be invisible. But Frederick's gaze held me like a tether, pulling me forward until I stood at the base of the platform, looking up at him. "Tell them," he said gently. "Tell them your story." I stared at him, panic clawing at my chest. "I can't." "You can." His voice was quiet but firm. "They need to hear it. Please, Clara." I looked out at the assembled pack. Hundreds of faces, most of them hostile or indifferent. These were the wolves who had ignored me for 3 years, who had watched me starve and bleed and said nothing. These were the nobles who benefited from Omega labor, the merchants who threw rocks, the guards who enforced Vincent's corruption. Why should I speak for their benefit? But then I caught sight of the other Omegas in the back of the crowd. Mira, who'd been saved by her neighbor's silver. The pregnant woman, just released from the stocks, her face bruised and her hand protective over her belly. Others whose names I didn't know but whose exhaustion I recognized in every line of their bodies. I wasn't speaking for the nobles or the guards. I was speaking for us. So I took a breath and began. "My name is Clara Gorge," I said, my voice shaking but audible. 3 years ago, Vincent Thorne told me I owed the pack 15 silver coins for my parents' funeral expenses. I was 21. My sister Lily was 11. We had just lost our parents to a rogue attack, and we were alone. I risked a glance at Vincent. His face had gone pale, but he didn't interrupt. 15 silver coins, I continued, payable at 2 silver per month. I earn copper pieces for washing clothes and cleaning stables. Sometimes I'm paid in food instead of coin. 2 silver per month was impossible. Is impossible. But Vincent said if I didn't pay, Lily and I would be expelled from pack territory. Thrown to the rogues. Murmurs rippled through the crowd now, uncomfortable and uncertain. So I worked. 3 jobs. Dawn to midnight, every day. My hands bled. I gave Lily my food and told her I'd eaten at the castle. And every month, Vincent added interest and fees to the debt. 15 silver became 18. Then 20. Then 25. My voice was stronger now, fed by 3 years of suppressed anger. Last week, Vincent summoned me to his office. He told me the debt was now too large to pay through work. He offered me an alternative arrangement. Said I could provide services to certain nobles, and my debt would disappear quickly. The crowd's reaction was louder now. Shock, disgust, denial. Vincent's face had gone from pale to gray. When I refused, he gave me 1 week to produce 10 silver coins. 1 week, or expulsion. 10 silver coins that I couldn't earn in a year. I looked directly at Vincent now, no longer afraid. That's when I understood. The debt was never meant to be paid. It was meant to trap me. To force me into servitude or worse. And I wasn't the only one. I turned back to the crowd and gestured toward the Omega section. Look at us. We're starving. We're exhausted. We work until our hands bleed, and it's never enough. We're told we're defective, broken, worthless. We're told we should be grateful for scraps. And when we can't pay fabricated debts with silver we're never given the chance to earn, we're punished. My voice cracked, but I pushed through. The Alpha King asked only one person in this entire pack stopped to help when he was disguised as a beggar. But that's not quite true. One other Omega helped someone else during the tax collection, paid extra silver to save a neighbor. We help each other when we can, even though we have nothing. Because we remember what it's like to be human. To be pack. I looked at Frederick again, and this time I didn't hide the tears on my face. You wanted to know if compassion still exists in this pack, Your Majesty? It does. But it exists in the wolves you've allowed to be crushed under systems that were designed to exploit them. It exists in the people who share bread they don't have, who sacrifice their own payment to save each other, who still choose kindness even when kindness has never been shown to them. The courtyard was absolutely silent now. So yes, I finished quietly. I gave a blind beggar half my bread. Not because I'm special or noble or better than anyone else. But because I remembered what my mother taught me before she died, that compassion is what separates us from rogues. And I refuse to let this pack take that from me too. I stopped talking. The silence stretched out, profound and heavy. Then, from the Omega section, someone started to speak. It was Mira. Her voice was small but growing stronger. My debt started at 8 silver, she said. For medicine my daughter needed. It's 20 now. They add fees every month, no matter what I pay. Another Omega spoke up. Then another. And another. Stories poured out, fabricated debts, impossible payments, threats of expulsion, guards who falsified records, nobles who demanded services that had nothing to do with cleaning or washing. The nobles in the crowd started to look uncomfortable. Some genuinely shocked, like they hadn't known. Others, including several I recognized from the castle, looked guilty. Caught. Frederick let them all speak. Let the stories accumulate into an undeniable weight of evidence. Then he raised his hand, and silence fell again. Vincent Thorne, Frederick said, his voice cold as winter. Step forward. Vincent did, his movements stiff. He was still trying to maintain his dignity, but I could see the fear in his eyes. Do you deny these accusations? Frederick asked. My lord, these are clearly exaggerations from malcontents who refuse to pay their fair share. Do you deny, Frederick interrupted, that you created fabricated debts to trap Omegas in servitude? That you falsified tax records? That you threatened Clara Gorge with expulsion unless she provided sexual services to nobles? Vincent's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. I have evidence, Frederick continued. He gestured, and one of his guards came forward carrying a stack of ledgers. Your ledgers, Vincent. I had my personal investigators examine them while I was conducting my test. The numbers don't match. Debts appear out of nowhere. Fees are added without authorization. Payments are recorded and then mysteriously forgotten. He opened one ledger and read aloud. Clara Gorge, 15 silver for funeral expenses. But according to pack records, standard funeral costs are 3 silver. Where did the other 12 come from? He flipped pages. Mira Lansing, 8 silver for medicine. But the pack's healers provide medicine for free to those who can't pay. So what was the 8 silver actually for? Frederick's voice rose with each revelation, his alpha command making every word hit like a physical blow. You created a system of exploitation, Vincent. You targeted the most vulnerable members of our pack, those who had no power to resist, no voice to complain. You threatened them with expulsion if they didn't comply. You offered young Omega women alternative arrangements that were nothing more than sexual slavery dressed up in official language. Vincent was on his knees now, though I hadn't seen him fall. His face was pressed to the ground in submission, his body trembling. And you did all of this, Frederick finished quietly, in my name. While I trusted you. While I believed you were helping me rebuild what my father destroyed. The pain in his voice was real. I could hear it, could feel it through the mate bond that was just beginning to form between us, though I didn't recognize it yet for what it was. Vincent Thorne, Frederick said formally, I strip you of your position as beta counselor. I strip you of your rank and status within this pack. And I banish you to the territories beyond our borders. You will face the same rogues you threatened these Omegas with for years. Perhaps they will be more merciful than you deserve. Guards moved forward immediately, grabbing Vincent's arms and hauling him to his feet. He tried to speak, tried to protest, but Frederick's alpha command cut through any words. Take him to the border, Frederick ordered. Now. We all watched as Vincent was dragged away, his protests fading into the distance. The courtyard remained silent until he was completely gone. Then Frederick turned back to the assembled pack. This ends today, he said. All fabricated debts are forgiven. Effective immediately, every Omega in this pack is released from any debt that cannot be verified through official pack records. The guards who participated in Vincent's scheme will be investigated and removed from their positions. The merchants who collaborated will be fined and banned from trading. The nobles who benefited from Omega exploitation will make restitution. He paused, letting that sink in. Furthermore, I am establishing an Omega Council with direct authority to report abuses to me personally. I am creating jobs with fair wages, not payment in scraps, but actual silver that can support families. I am building housing for those who need it and providing education opportunities for late shifters and non-shifters alike. Lily. My heart clenched thinking of my sister, who'd spent so long believing she was broken. This pack, Frederick continued, was founded on principles of mutual protection and community support. My father corrupted those principles through tyranny and violence. I thought I had fixed the damage by changing laws and policies. But I was wrong. Laws mean nothing if the people enforcing them are corrupt. If the culture remains broken. His eyes found mine again, and this time there was something warm in his gaze. Something that made my breath catch. Clara Gorge reminded me of something crucial, that true strength isn't dominating the weak. It's protecting them. That true worth isn't measured in rank or silver, but in compassion and dignity. That the mark of a good pack isn't how well we treat our strongest members, but how we care for our most vulnerable. He descended from the platform and walked directly toward me. The crowd parted automatically, their shock palpable. An Alpha King didn't walk through crowds. Didn't approach Omegas directly. Didn't. Frederick stopped in front of me and, to my utter shock, knelt. He knelt in the dirt before me, the Alpha King in his royal cloak, his blue eyes level with mine. Clara Gorge, he said quietly, though his voice still carried across the silent courtyard, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening sooner. I'm sorry I let Vincent hurt you and your sister and so many others. I'm sorry I had to deceive you to learn the truth. And I'm sorry that you felt you had to share bread you couldn't spare because no one else in this pack remembered how to be decent. My throat was so tight I couldn't speak. You owe this pack nothing, Frederick continued. But this pack owes you everything. Your compassion, your strength, your refusal to let cruelty destroy your humanity, that's what I want to rebuild here. That's the foundation I should have been creating all along. He held out his hand, palm up, offering rather than demanding. Help me, he said simply. Help me build a pack worth being part of. Teach me how to see what you see. Show me how to lead with the kind of compassion you showed a blind beggar in the dark. I stared at his outstretched hand. At this powerful man kneeling before me, asking for my help instead of commanding it. Around us, the entire pack watched in stunned silence. This was a test too, I realized. Not of me this time, but of them. Frederick was showing them that strength could kneel. That power could admit failure. That an Alpha King could learn from an Omega. Slowly, carefully, I placed my bleeding, work-worn hand in his clean, strong one. His fingers closed around mine, warm and steady, and I felt something shift in my chest. Something that felt like a door opening, like light flooding into a room that had been dark for years. Frederick smiled, a real smile, not the careful political expression I'd seen in his portraits, but something genuine and warm. Then he stood, pulling me gently to my feet, and turned back to the assembled pack while still holding my hand. This is what leadership looks like, he said to the crowd. Not a king isolated in his castle, trusting reports and ledgers. But a king who walks among his people. Who listens to their stories. Who admits when he's wrong and asks for help in making things right. He squeezed my hand once, then released it and addressed the pack with his full alpha authority. You are all dismissed. Return to your homes. Tomorrow, we begin rebuilding. But remember what you witnessed here today. Remember that the Omega you ignored, the beggar you spat on, the vulnerable wolf you stepped over, they might be the very people who hold the key to our pack's redemption. The crowd began to disperse slowly, still stunned, still processing. I heard whispers starting up around us, but for once they weren't cruel. They were confused, uncertain, maybe even impressed. I turned to leave, to find Lily in the crowd and get as far from this overwhelming situation as possible. But Frederick's voice stopped me. Clara. Wait. I turned back. He descended from the platform entirely now and was standing close enough that I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of leadership that had settled back on his shoulders the moment he removed the beggar's disguise. I meant what I said, he told me quietly, pitched for my ears alone. About wanting your help. About rebuilding. I understand if you don't trust me yet. I understand if you need time. But I hope you'll give me a chance to prove that what happened between us, when you thought I was just Frederick, not the Alpha King, that was real. My heart was doing complicated things in my chest. Part of me was still angry about the deception. Part of me was terrified of hoping. But another part, a part that had been dormant for years, was waking up and whispering that maybe, just maybe, things could actually change. I need to find my sister, I said, not quite answering his unspoken question. Frederick nodded, accepting that. Of course. But Clara? You and Lily will never go hungry again. You'll never be threatened or exploited. I give you my word as Alpha King. Words are easy, I said, echoing what I'd told him the night before. It's the actions that matter. Then watch my actions, Frederick replied. And judge me based on what I do, not what I promise. I nodded once and left to find Lily. She was waiting near the courtyard wall, her face pale but her eyes bright with something that might have been pride. Clara, she breathed as I reached her. You were so brave. I've never seen anyone talk to nobles like that. To the Alpha King himself. I was terrified, I admitted, taking her hand. I'm still terrified. But you did it anyway. Lily smiled, a real smile, the first I'd seen in months. That's what brave means. We walked home together as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The path seemed less oppressive now, the forest less threatening. Maybe it was just my imagination, or maybe something fundamental had shifted in the pack's energy. When we reached our cabin, there were 2 guards waiting outside. My stomach dropped, my first instinct still fear despite everything Frederick had said. But these guards didn't look hostile. They looked uncomfortable. Like they didn't quite know how to approach us. Miss Gorge, one of them said, nodding respectfully. Actually respectfully, not the mocking deference I was used to. The Alpha King asked us to deliver these. They held out 2 large baskets. One was filled with food, bread, cheese, dried meat, fresh vegetables, more food than Lily and I had seen in months. The other contained clean clothes, blankets, medical supplies, and a small pouch that clinked with the sound of coins. He said to tell you that your cabin will be repaired tomorrow, the guard continued. And that someone from the Omega Council, once it's established, will visit to discuss your needs. I stared at the baskets, overwhelmed. This was real. Frederick was actually following through, actually taking action instead of just making promises. Thank you, I managed. The guards nodded and left. Lily and I carried the baskets inside, and for the first time in 3 years, we ate until we were full. We wrapped ourselves in the new blankets, soft and warm, and Lily fell asleep with a smile on her face. I stayed awake longer, sitting by the small window and looking out at the forest. My hands were still raw and bleeding, my body still aching from years of overwork. One day of change couldn't erase 3 years of suffering. But it was a start. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough to let myself hope. The pack transformed faster than I thought possible. Within 3 days of the assembly, Frederick had established the Omega Council. He personally selected 12 Omegas, including me, though I tried to refuse, and gave us actual authority to investigate complaints and report directly to him. We met twice a week in a room in the castle that had been converted into a council chamber, with comfortable chairs and tables laden with refreshments. It felt surreal, sitting in the castle as a welcome guest instead of a scrubbing servant. The first cases we heard were heartbreaking. Omegas who'd been trapped in Vincent's debt system for years, who'd lost children to starvation, who'd been forced into arrangements that made my skin crawl. But Frederick listened to every story. He authorized restitution payments, provided housing, arranged medical care, and personally apologized to each Omega who'd suffered. The guards who'd participated in the corruption were stripped of their positions. Some were banished like Vincent. Others, those who'd followed orders but shown remorse, were reassigned to manual labor positions where they could see firsthand what their actions had enabled. The merchants who'd thrown rocks and refused service to beggars were fined heavily. Their licenses were suspended, and they had to perform community service, serving meals at the new Omega shelter Frederick had established, distributing food and supplies, learning to see the people they'd once treated as invisible. And the nobles. The nobles had their own reckoning. Those who'd benefited from alternative arrangements with young Omega women faced public shame and loss of status. Their families were humiliated. Their businesses suffered as other pack members refused to associate with them. It wasn't perfect justice. Nothing could give back the years that had been stolen. But it was something. It was Frederick proving through action that he meant what he'd said. Our cabin was repaired within the week, not just patched, but properly fixed with new roof tiles, reinforced walls, and a better heating system. Workers arrived every morning and treated us with respect, asking Lily and me what we wanted rather than telling us what we'd get. The jobs Frederick created actually paid fair wages. I took a position in the castle library, not because I could read well, but because Frederick said I could learn while I worked, and he wanted Omegas in positions where they could develop skills beyond manual labor. Lily was enrolled in the pack school. Not the separate, lesser school that non-shifters usually attended, but the main school alongside wolf pups from every rank. She came home that first day with tears streaming down her face, and my heart stopped until she smiled and said, "Clara, they didn't call me broken." Not even once. Every evening, I saved a portion of our dinner and brought it to the place by the castle wall where I'd first met Frederick. He was never there, of course he wasn't, he had a kingdom to run, but somehow it felt important to honor that spot. To remember the moment when everything changed. Until one evening, 2 weeks after the assembly, when I found him waiting there. Not dressed as a beggar this time, but not in full royal regalia either. Just simple clothes, a dark cloak, his circlet left behind. He was sitting against the wall in almost the exact same position as before, and when he heard my footsteps, he smiled. "Clara," he said, standing. "I was hoping you'd come." My heart did that complicated thing again, the flutter and clench that I'd been trying to ignore. "You were waiting for me?" "I've been waiting every evening for a week," Frederick admitted. "But you always come late, after I have to leave for evening council meetings." I didn't know what to say to that. The Alpha King had been waiting for me. Hoping to see me. It didn't make sense. "I brought food," I said awkwardly, holding out the bundle I'd prepared. "I know you don't need it now, but it's tradition," Frederick finished gently. "Thank you." He accepted the bundle and sat back down, patting the ground beside him in invitation. After a moment's hesitation, I joined him. We sat in silence for a while, sharing the meal I'd brought, bread and cheese and apples from the castle stores that I was now allowed to access freely. "How is Lily?" Frederick asked eventually. "Happy," I said, and I couldn't keep the smile out of my voice. "She's actually happy, Your Majesty. She comes home from school talking about friends she made, things she learned. She's not afraid anymore." "I'm glad." Frederick was quiet for a moment, then, "And you? Are you happy?" The question caught me off guard. Was I happy? I had food, safety, dignity. I had work that didn't leave my hands bleeding. I had a sister who smiled again. By any measure, I should be ecstatic. But happiness felt complicated. Fragile. Like something that could be taken away if I trusted it too much. "I'm adjusting," I said carefully. Frederick nodded like he understood. "It's hard to believe in change when you've been hurt for so long. Trust takes time to rebuild." "You sound like you're speaking from experience." "I am." He stared out at the forest, his expression distant. "My father was a tyrant. He ruled through fear and violence, and by the time he died, the pack was broken. I spent 8 years trying to fix what he'd destroyed, changing laws, replacing counselors, establishing new systems. I thought I was succeeding." His jaw tightened. "But I was just creating a different version of the same problem. I was ruling from a distance, trusting reports instead of seeing the truth for myself. I was so focused on big structural changes that I didn't notice the daily cruelties happening right under my nose." "You noticed eventually," I pointed out. "Only because someone sent me an anonymous letter detailing Omega exploitation. Even then, I had to disguise myself to believe it was real." He looked at me, and his blue eyes were full of something raw and honest. "I failed you, Clara. Failed all of you. And I'm sorry." I'd heard him apologize publicly at the assembly. But this felt different. This was Frederick, not the Alpha King. This was the man who'd accepted my bread with trembling hands and thanked me for seeing him. You're trying to fix it now, I said quietly. That's what matters. Is it enough? The question was almost desperate. Is what I'm doing enough to make up for the years of suffering I allowed? I thought about that. About Lily smiling again. About omegas in the council chamber being heard. About nobles learning to see people they'd once ignored. About my hands healing because I wasn't scrubbing laundry 18 hours a day anymore. It's a start, I said honestly. A good start. But Frederick, you can't fix everything instantly. Some wounds take time to heal. Some trust has to be rebuilt slowly. I know. He was quiet for a long moment, then, can I ask you something? And will you answer honestly, even if you think it's not what I want to hear? Yes. When you gave me that bread, when you thought I was just a blind beggar, why did you do it? You had so little. Lily needed that food. Why share it with a stranger? I remembered that night. The exhaustion, the despair, the impossible choice. I remembered his outstretched hands and the way something in my chest had refused to let me walk past. Because, I said slowly, working through the thought as I spoke, if I'd left you there, if I'd walked away and let you suffer when I could have helped, I would have become the thing I hated most about this pack. I would have proven that the cruelty won. That they'd managed to crush the last bit of humanity out of me. I looked at him, trying to make him understand. That bread wasn't just food, Frederick. It was proof. Proof that I was still me. That I could still choose compassion even when it cost me. That I hadn't let them turn me into someone who steps over suffering without flinching. Frederick's eyes were suspiciously bright. You have no idea how extraordinary you are, do you? The words made me uncomfortable. I'm not. You are. He shifted closer, his shoulder pressing against mine. Clara, do you know how many nobles walked past me that day? How many guards, how many merchants? Hundreds of wolves with full bellies and comfortable lives, and not one of them stopped. But you, starving, exhausted, barely surviving, you shared what you didn't have. Anyone would have. They didn't. His voice was firm. That's the point. They didn't. You did. And that tells me everything I need to know about your character. My face was burning now. I didn't know how to accept praise, didn't know how to process the way Frederick was looking at me, like I was something precious instead of something broken. I should go, I said, starting to stand. Lily will be wondering where I am. Frederick caught my hand gently. Clara, wait. There's something else I need to tell you. I froze. His hand was warm around mine, his touch careful, like he was afraid I'd pull away. That night you gave me the bread, Frederick said quietly, something happened. Something I didn't expect. What? He took a breath. My wolf recognized you. Even suppressed, even with my aura dampened, he knew. And in the 2 weeks since then, that recognition has only gotten stronger. My heart was pounding now, because I knew what he was about to say. I'd been feeling it too, the pull, the awareness, the way my wolf perked up whenever Frederick was near. Clara, Frederick said, his voice rough with emotion, I think you're my mate. The world tilted. Everything I'd been trying not to acknowledge, trying not to hope for, came crashing down around me. Mates. We were mates. An alpha king and a poor omega. A ruler and someone who'd been trapped at the bottom of the hierarchy. It was impossible. It was. I know it's complicated, Frederick continued quickly, reading my panic. I know the power imbalance makes this difficult. I know you have every reason not to trust me, not to want this. And I swear to you, Clara, I will never use my position to pressure you. If you don't want the mate bond, if you want to reject me, I'll accept that. I'll still fix the pack, still protect you and Lily, still. Frederick, I interrupted, my voice shaking. Stop. He stopped, his expression bracing for rejection. I thought about the past 2 weeks. About Frederick proving through action that he meant what he said. About the way he'd knelt in the dirt before me. About how he'd listened to every Omega's story without defensiveness or excuse. About the man who'd accepted my bread with trembling hands and thanked me for seeing him when he had nothing. I thought about my wolf, who'd been stirring more and more lately, drawn to Frederick's presence like a moth to flame. And I thought about what my mother had taught me, that compassion is what separates us from rogues. Frederick had shown me compassion when I was invisible. Had seen my worth when no one else did. Had asked for my help instead of commanding it. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was a foundation we could build on. I don't want to reject you, I said quietly. Frederick's expression transformed, hope lighting his face like dawn. You don't? No. But. I took a breath. This is terrifying, Frederick. You're the Alpha King. I'm just. Don't. His voice was fierce. Don't say just. You're Clara Gorge, the woman who reminded me what strength really means. You're brilliant and compassionate and brave, and you have more integrity in your little finger than most nobles have in their entire bodies. The intensity in his gaze made me breathless. I don't know how to be someone's mate, I admitted. I don't know how to navigate pack politics or be whatever an Alpha King's mate is supposed to be. Then we'll figure it out together. Frederick squeezed my hand. I don't need you to be anything other than who you are. The Omega Council was your idea, well, my implementation of your observation that Omegas needed voices. The school integration came from your comment about Lily. Half the reforms I've made were inspired by things you said without even realizing their importance. He smiled, soft and genuine. You're already changing this pack, Clara. Already making it better just by being yourself. I don't want you to become someone different. I want the chance to know you. To build something real with you. No disguises, no tests, no power games. Just Frederick and Clara, figuring out how to be mates and partners and maybe, eventually, people who love each other. Love. The word hung between us, huge and terrifying and impossibly beautiful. I'd never expected love. Had stopped believing in it years ago when survival became my only goal. But here was Frederick, offering it like a gift instead of a demand. Slowly, I said finally. We'd do this slowly. I need time to trust this. To trust you. To believe it's real and not going to disappear. As slowly as you need, Frederick agreed immediately. We have time, Clara. All the time in the world. I nodded, and for the first time in years, I let myself hope. Really hope, not the fragile, quickly crushed kind, but the sturdy kind that could weather disappointment and grow stronger. Okay, I said. Okay, let's try. Frederick's smile could have lit the entire pack territory. He lifted my hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to my scarred knuckles, the hands that had bled from work, that had offered him bread when I had nothing, that were finally beginning to heal. Thank you, he whispered against my skin. Thank you for giving me a chance. For sharing your bread. For reminding me what matters. And there, sitting in the dirt by the castle wall where everything had changed, I felt the mate bond click into place. Not overwhelming, not consuming, but steady and warm and right. Like coming home after years of being lost. The castle library became my favorite place in the entire pack territory. I spent my mornings there, surrounded by books I was slowly learning to read, helping wolves research pack history and laws. Frederick had been right, I couldn't read well when I started, but I learned quickly, driven by curiosity that had been suppressed for years. Lily joined me sometimes after school, curling up in the window seat with her own books, her presence a quiet comfort. She'd grown taller in 6 months, healthier, her laugh coming more easily now. She'd even made friends, real friends who didn't care that she couldn't shift. The Omega Council had evolved into something more powerful than I'd imagined. We didn't just hear complaints anymore, we helped shape policy. We advised Frederick on everything from housing to education to healthcare. And slowly, the pack's culture was shifting from hierarchy and domination to community and mutual support. It wasn't perfect. There were still wolves who resented the changes, who grumbled about Omegas getting above themselves. There were still nobles who had to be reminded that respect wasn't optional. There were still guards who had to unlearn years of casual cruelty. But it was better. So much better than it had been. And Frederick. Frederick was everything he'd promised and more. He courted me properly, the way mates should be courted, with respect and patience and genuine interest in who I was, not just what I represented. We had dinner together twice a week, sometimes in the castle dining hall, sometimes in my cabin with Lily chattering happily between us. We took walks through pack territory, and Frederick introduced me to wolves I'd never known existed, healers and teachers and craftsmen who were delighted to meet their Alpha King's mate. Because that's what I was now. Officially, formally, Frederick's mate and the pack's Luna. The mating ceremony had been 3 months ago, small and intimate despite Frederick's protests that tradition demanded a huge celebration. I'd insisted, I didn't want spectacle, didn't want hundreds of wolves I barely knew watching the most important moment of my life. So it had just been us, Lily, Frederick's most trusted advisors, and the Omega Council. We'd stood under the full moon, and Frederick had spoken vows that made me cry, promises about protection and partnership and seeing each other truly, always. When it was my turn, I'd looked into his blue eyes and said the only thing that mattered, you stopped being a king the night you sat in the dirt and accepted my bread. You became just Frederick, vulnerable and honest and real. That's the man I'm mating. Not the Alpha King, but the person underneath the crown. The one who's willing to learn, to admit mistakes, to build something better. I'd paused, making sure he understood. I promise to be your partner. To challenge you when you're wrong, support you when you're right, and always remind you what matters most. I promise to help you lead with compassion instead of dominance. And I promise to love you, not because you're powerful, but because you chose to become powerless to learn the truth. Frederick had kissed me then, in front of our tiny audience, and the mate bond had sealed completely. I'd felt his wolf recognize mine, felt the connection snap into place like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. Now, 6 months after that night by the castle wall, I stood in the library and looked out the window at the pack territory spreading below. The market square where I'd once watched Omegas be extorted was now bustling with fair trade. The stocks where the pregnant Omega had been punished had been torn down and replaced with a fountain. The cabin where Lily and I had nearly starved was now just one home among many, all of them sturdy, all of them warm. And in the castle behind me, Frederick was holding his weekly open audience, a new tradition where any wolf, regardless of rank, could bring concerns directly to their Alpha King. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. 6 months of mating had made me attuned to his presence, his scent, the particular way he moved. There you are, Frederick said, entering the library with a smile. I've been looking for you. How was the audience? I asked, turning from the window. Productive. A dispute about property boundaries, a request for funding to expand the school, and a young Omega who wanted to thank me personally for the job placement program. His smile widened. She brought me bread. Said it reminded her of the story about the Alpha King and the compassionate Omega. My chest tightened with emotion. Our story had spread throughout the pack, transformed into something almost mythic, the king who tested his pack as a beggar, the Omega who shared her last food. Children told versions of it in the schoolyard. Omegas repeated it like a promise that change was possible. I hope you accepted it graciously, I said. I did. Though I have to admit, your bread was better. I laughed and moved into his arms, letting him pull me close. This still felt new sometimes, being allowed to touch him freely, to seek comfort in his embrace, to exist in his space without fear or servitude. I have something to tell you, I said against his chest. Frederick pulled back slightly, concern flickering across his face. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I smiled up at him. I'm pregnant. For a moment, Frederick just stared at me, processing. Then his expression transformed into pure joy, no careful political mask, just genuine happiness radiating from every line of his body. Pregnant, he repeated, like he needed to hear it again to believe it. We're having a pup? We're having a pup, I confirmed. Frederick lifted me off my feet, spinning me in a circle that made me laugh and clutch at his shoulders. When he set me down, his hands came to rest gently on my still flat stomach, his touch reverent. A pup, he whispered. Our pup. Clara, this is. I don't have words. Neither do I admitted. I'm terrified and excited and overwhelmed. We'll figure it out together, Frederick said, echoing the promise he'd made 6 months ago. Just like everything else. I nodded, trusting that. Trusting him. Trusting us. Through the library window, I could see the pack territory transforming in the golden afternoon light. Wolves walking together, talking and laughing. Children playing without fear. Omegas moving through the streets with their heads held high instead of hunched in submission. This was what we'd built. What we were still building, day by day, choice by choice. It had started with a piece of bread shared in the darkness. With compassion offered when it cost everything. With a king willing to become powerless to learn the truth, and an Omega willing to risk hope one more time. And now it was becoming something bigger. Something lasting. Something worth protecting. I love you, I said to Frederick, meaning it with every fiber of my being. I love you too, he replied. Thank you for sharing your bread with a blind beggar. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for giving us, a chance to build something real. I kissed him then, there in the library with the afternoon sun streaming through the windows and our future growing inside me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. Thriving. Building a pack and a family and a future I'd never dared to dream possible. All because one night, I'd chosen compassion over self-preservation. All because Frederick had chosen truth over comfortable distance. All because we'd both been willing to believe that broken things could be mended, that corrupt systems could be transformed, and that love could grow from the smallest acts of kindness. The pack needed more people like you, Frederick had said that first night. Now, 6 months later, I understood the truth. The pack needed more people like both of us. People willing to see suffering and stop. People willing to admit mistakes and learn. People willing to build something better, even when it was hard, even when it cost them everything. Because that's what family means. What pack means. What love means. Not dominance, but partnership. Not hierarchy, but community. Not power over others, but power shared, power used to protect and uplift and transform. This was the story I would tell our pup someday. The story of the Alpha King who disguised himself as a blind beggar, and the Omega who shared her last food, and how one moment of compassion changed everything. It was a good story. But more than that, it was true. And it was only the beginning. The end. If this story touched your heart, if Clara and Frederick's journey reminded you of the power of compassion and the possibility of transformation, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below telling me your favorite moment. Was it when Clara first shared her bread? When Frederick revealed his identity? Or maybe the moment they finally accepted the mate bond? Your comments help me understand what resonates with you and inspire future stories. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you never miss another tale from the pack. Until next time, remember, sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes. Thank you for listening to this story, and thank you for being part of our growing community.